Welcome to the BPM 360 podcast. I'm Russell.
And I'm Casper. And together we will help you navigate the treacherous waters of the BPM adoption journey. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the BPM 360 podcast. My name's Casper, your host. And with me today is, as always, my co-host, Russell. My friend, how are you?
I feel terrible today.
Oh,
and I'll tell you why. A couple of days ago, the sun was shining, so I started saying, hey, let's go outside. And I did a mistake. I went on the scales. I weighed myself. And
okay.
it was devastating. I mean, us talking about belts in the intro, and it really was bad. So but the cool thing is, just to bridge this over to our topic of BPM, ultimately, you start thinking of, okay, I've got to get this down, and you set yourself a goal. You said, so I've got to get down to that level, that I had something like 2 years ago. And then you say, how do I get there? And then you're thinking about, okay, it's the diet. Oh God, the diet again. You talk about Jojo. You start reading up on stuff. I think, what am I going to do? You've got to go and get there. Ultimately, though, if I look at, say, what I have been doing, it all comes down to bad habits. Yeah. So I think my normal eating is kind of fine. My level of exercise is really not bad, but it really is the bad habits that kill me. The weekend, hey, let's go for some partying, not sleeping enough, maybe drinking alcohol, maybe not, eating crap, crisps and whatever, which I love. Oh, chocolate.
Oh, yeah.
Thinking about it.
Oh, I feel
so it's all the bad habits. And I think if I cut the crap, if I cut the bad habits, ultimately I would be things would be so much better. So it's not that you don't have to be like perfect. And I think a lot of people do more or less the intuitively right things, but then there are these kind of like the moments of bad habits that happen. On the other hand, that's where I'm trying to switch and get into the good habits. And thinking about process management, I think if we look around our customers and stuff like that, a lot of the situation is in a mess. And if you look at, they started off with a good structure, they go down the line. But what I think is not so much about did they do the wrong methodology? Did they take the wrong tool? Now, it's more an accumulation of bad habits in their day-to-day procedures, and where you start building up things, and then all of a sudden you have this period of bad habits, I will call it, and then you kind of gain weight, and then you have to struggle uphill to get that that fat off again. And I think also with this situation with customers in BPM, a lot of the situations we see with matured, organizations, they get kind of like tired of the good habits, and every time you have one bad habit and you have a period of, not tidying up, it's twice as much work to get it back to that level. And that's maybe we can dive into that sometime. But I think today with our guest, a lot of what we'll be talking about is actually, I hope, what are the good habits that you have to start off with and stick with
backtrack,
to actually
Russell.
make something like that really work, huh?
Just backtrack. We have a guest?
We have a guest.
Oh, cool. We have a guest. Yeah, we didn't forget you. But ladies and gentlemen, we have a guest today, and it's none other than author Roland Woldt. Roland. Ooh, yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
welcome to the show.
I'm not sure if I'm the right guest. If I should talk about bad habits, I could. Good habits.
No,
well, everybody can be a good, can act as a bad example. So hey, look at the way he's doing it. That's not how you want to do it.
Yeah.
Perspective,
but
yes.
Rest assured, Roland, we'll be focusing on the good practices in this particular episode,
Yes.
and of course, you've been on the show before together with JM as part of the What's Your Baseline podcast. But just for the people who missed that episode, could you please introduce yourself a little bit and especially focus on how on earth did you end up in process management?
Oh, you catch me on the wrong foot now.
Yes.
Win. Yeah. So the short answer is I'm doing that consulting gig for like 30 years, almost 30 years. And before that, I spent 11 years in the German Armed Forces driving around with main battle tanks and having nothing to do with computers. But my first gig in consulting was with back then Anderson Consulting, or Accenture now.
Accenture,
And I was staffed on a project with the Deutsche Bahn, the German railway. And they were using a tool called Eris, that nobody knew. And they said,
yeah. I heard about
it.
it.
Don't touch it. You could break it. And guess what piqued my curiosity, and then a couple of years later, I worked for Ideas Shear, the maker of the tool, yada, yada, yada. Went on. We were bought by Software AG. I moved to America, switched over to KPMG. Haven't learned anything out of the big consulting firm thing. Stayed there for 7 years, ran their EA practice. Went back to Software AG, became the VP of Global Consulting at iGraphics. So also in that industry, and now work in a small EA boutique shop, right? And through all that time, process is one of the big constants that went through my career, if you will. And about 4 years ago, I had that idea, what happens if I'm gone? What's my legacy? Or in other words, why do the customers always ask the same things? And I thought, okay, write it down,
Yeah.
And out of that came a podcast, and out of that came a lot of dead trees, and I wrote a book.
And that
That's
book is called?
the short answer.
And the book is called?
The book is called, and I don't know, for videos, it's called Successful Architecture Implementation, a practical guide on how to implement your EA and BPM program. And the idea was that, like I said before, clients are always asking the same things, and Kasper, that when you have a solution engineer role, it's not the client's fault, but it gets a little bit boring and tedious, always do the same, sing and dance, and you become the performer instead of the creator, and I thought, okay, hey, maybe I just write it down. And then out of that, and that's actually 4 years ago.
Read the fucking book.
Yeah, well, that's a short answer.
So then we're done with the episode.
RTFM,
RTFM.
RTFB in this
Thank
case.
you for having me. Thank you for having me. It was great.
No, we're not done with you yet. Don't worry.
No, so if you think about the book, so then I think that's quite good, because I was going to ask, okay, yet another book. Yeah. So aren't there like myriads of BPM related books on the market? If you're saying it's my book and it's my story, so it's my show, and that's what I give my, it's like this idea of but diving a bit into that, on looking at the set of books that you see on the market, what would you say really is the special topic that you dig into? What is something where you say that is something you didn't see, maybe not, it's outdated what other literature is showing, but maybe there's just some other spin to it that you say that's been missing, and the way it's being compiled is something that just is different than other books. What would you bring that down to 2-3 sentences?
So the majority of books around process management that I've seen are high-flying, 30,000-foot level thing. I don't want to name names, but we all worked for shops that created those books, and they're used mostly as marketing tools. There are smart ideas in there, but it's like that 30,000-foot level. What I didn't find, the other type is, books like BPMN for dummies, DMN, the nerdy stuff, for those people who don't want to read the standard documentation, which I don't blame anyone. I've read the BPMN spec more often than I wanted.
Really?
But it's like lower level, right? I feel pity. But what was missing was that, and this is why it has a subtitle, was like a practical guide. How do I do this? Right. And I was thinking, it's like the audience for our podcast, which I think is a very high overlap with the audience of your podcast as well, is the people who work or lead practices. Right. So they might have that glorious idea, that process thing, that architecture thing that might do good in our organization. Why don't we try it? And then they go to a vendor, right? No names will be named. and I say, give me your overpriced stuff, right? And now give me the license and go away, right? And I have been on projects where at Casper, I'm pretty sure you heard that, where customers said, oh yeah, tool so and so. That's like Visio on steroids.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like, oh, here we are again.
Yeah, yeah.
Or I had one customer, I was asking them which architecture, a big bank here, which architecture which architecture tool do you use? And the answer was whiteboard. And I
Yeah.
said, oh,
Yeah.
So what I noticed, and that was the motivation for writing the book, was you need to give people something at the hand to say, okay, how do I implement that thing? Because if you just buy a tool, that doesn't mean that it will be accepted. And I've seen too many situations where a tool was bought for a single project and the person who was all in love with it moved on, and then it ended up on a shelf, collected dust. And at some point, rightfully so, somebody was asking, why do we pay fees for that, subscription fees or maintenance or whatever, right? So the typical fails.
Yeah, and that's a good point because one of the questions I noted down was you're talking about adoption as a critical success factor. So I think the book is not about just getting one project done, not just getting, let's say, one set of processes documented, but you are thinking about the whole idea of architecture, getting it into the company for good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and on the other hand, we've discussed this in our podcast also a lot, looking at our, we started off with sponsorship and then about ownership. And we always, I think, and also a lot of practitioners, that are having, issues. They said, I've got the tool, I've got the processes, but, I'm stuck in the adoption. So we've talked about this a lot. Now coming back to say your practical guide, even in the podcast, Caspar, sometimes I think, are we giving the people real, tangible, what recommendations how to really get it done? Are we just talking about it? The people say, yeah, I have the same problem, but do we really provide practical answers where I said, oh, that was really helpful. I'm gonna go around, like sometimes you have podcasts that they say do 10 sit-ups in the morning and don't eat crisps after 8 o'clock and then you will lose weight and you go, wow, fantastic, I'm gonna do that. Good habits. So what is your good habit? What is your practical what would you say is something that people could take home after they've heard the podcast and say, oh, that's good, I'm gonna get the book for the rest of the good habits in there on the topic of adoption?
Yeah. So first of all, I appreciate your British English. It's called chips, not crisps, right? So just to have it said.
Just called French fries, you idiots.
They're fried chips. Crisps are
they're French fries. Let's settle that debate once and for all. Anyway, Roland, go on.
Yeah. So anyways, long story short, there's three cornerstone contents that I have in the book. And Russell, you mentioned what I visualized in a Venn diagram. Right. In my mind, a good implementation needs to tackle three topics. One is the actual content, right? And if you ask customers, why do you buy the tool? They say, oh yeah, I need to create solution architectures or manage app rationalization or whatever it is what you want to do. So actual content work, create diagrams, do process mining, all those things. The other two things are which you obviously follow on is governance design. You need to talk about what are the rules of engagement. If I got a new hire, Caspar, coming to the project as a modeler, what's the first question that Caspar will have? What am I supposed to do? That's the second one, but what do you want me to do? Right. Yep. So you need to define this, roles and all that type of stuff. And then the third one is, Russell, to your point, is adoption. Because, and I said it over and over again, you can put as many wallpapers on the wall as you want, your governance processes. You can put as many black boxes in their basements, your tools. If the person in front of the screen doesn't want to do it, they won't. Right? So you need to talk about and define your strategy. Who do we want to be when we grow up? Right. And I talk about how you create such a strategy. What are the ingredients for it? Then you need to talk about how do I communicate? So who are my stakeholders? What's in it for them? Or how do I reach out to them? What's the change curve? The valley of despair that everybody goes through. And then obviously we're talking about things like enablement. but how do I set that up? And one of the things that I did in the past, which I'm still pretty proud of, was, for example, the iGraphics University, which was my idea, and we built it up to, I think, a really nice resource. So those three things: content, governance, adoption. You need to find a balance, Russell, in those three things. And if you just do one, you will fail.
Yeah. And I think listening to those three, I can almost one-on-one map them into the BPM adoption framework that we have on the in this case on the top of that. It's pretty much similar. And I think that you're totally right. I mean, the one thing that customers that I work with very often overlook is the fact that you need to think about, why am I doing this, before you start implementing anything. Because the answer to the question, why am I doing this, gives you a lot of insights into how do I need to deploy my tooling to make it actually fit for purpose.
Yeah.
So
I think, to Russell's point, I think what my contribution is, so that's one of three main concepts in there, is I give examples, from previous projects. I give actionable advice. Do this, do that, track it here, create a list of priorities, whatever. So it's really hands-on, right? As much as you can be hands-on in a book.
Oh yeah.
Right? Because people will have to make their own mistakes and then say, oh damn, I read it differently. Maybe next time I do it as I read there.
Yeah. It's like you're driving a car and you think, well, navigation says that I should turn left, but I know better, I go right. And then afterwards you always say, damn it, I should have listened to the navigation.
Yeah, true.
All right, cool.
Yeah, the other concept or key content, if you will, is the approach for an implementation that I propose. And when you look at the structure of the book, I talk about the change in role of architects, and I put in that gobbledygook that architects utter, TOGAF, BPM, all that nonsense. And make the case why you should build up that capability. And oh, by the way, which capabilities should you build, right? And it's 5. But at some point in time, well, you have to think about, okay, how do I do this now, right? And the second cornerstone content is an approach model. And if Olaf Geyer listens to it, he will roll his eyes because he doesn't like my slide for this. It has a lot of chevrons on it. But it's basically 4 big things. The first is, in lack of a better term, is strategy work, right? And I alluded to it a little bit before. Who do we want to be when we grow up? How do we communicate? How do we create visibility, right? What reporting and dashboards do I need to steer the ship? The second big part is governance, and I agree, overlap. What are the processes? What are the roles? What are the org units that we have to stand up? And I talk, for example, in that chapter about how we was way back when I was at KPMG, reintroduce an ARB at a customer who really had bad experience with the first one, because as we all know, the ARB is the Architecture Review Board, is the Committee of No, NO, right? And we wanted to have it to be the Committee of No, KNOW, right? So we had a very
small difference.
Tiny hands-off approach. We defined 4 different levels and so on. So I explain these things in the book. And then obviously the question is enablement and all those things in that governance part. The third thing is technology. Well, what do I actually need? What do I have to look for? How do I buy it? I'm always surprised how few people have been part of an enterprise software buying process before, right? So I talk about that, which roles are in there. And I created, for example, a graphic with all the little people in there. And once I was done, I said, man, that's quite a bit of people, in different stages, Yeah. And then the last phase is content creation or import of existing content, right? Because you don't want to start from scratch, because that will lower the adoption rate, because people don't want to redo things, right? So how do you go and take your million spreadsheets, Visio files, Tool X files, whatever it is, and how do you bring that in? And in the technology chapter, I also talk about talking about practical things, Casper,
Yeah.
things like, how many databases do I need? Right? How do I do release management? Well, how do I structure my database internally, and so on and so forth? Which brings me to the third cornerstone content, which is the process lifecycle, right? And we've spoken about that, Casper, when you were on our show, management of change and all that stuff.
MOC. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's basically the 5 phases that you see. 2 layers: design and execution, and then you have that high-level design strategy thingy on top, where you feed your repository with content and do some high-level analysis and say, oh yeah, I think it stinks here, here, and here. Well, which of the stinky parts do we tackle first, right? And then you take that and you go into solution design, which is a complete different beast. But now you have your blinders on, and you say, okay, I just take the first stinky, and I don't care that I have to implement it in 3 transition states over 1.5 years. I'm just interested in that one, right? How does the world look like 6 months from now when we're done, right?
Yeah.
And you do, and I like what SAP did in the 2000s when they said, oh yeah, business blueprint and technical blueprint. I don't know how it's in Europe. Here in America, nobody does blueprints. The equivalent is, I want to build a house. Let's hop in the pickup truck, go to the big box store, buy 2x4s, hammer and nails, and start hammering. Right?
Yeah.
And that's not great. So then comes the point where you actually implement it. Once you have your design, load bearing, yada, 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 calculations, you do your implementation, you do your execution, right? So people actually do the processes and you want to interact with that. And then you go back into that design space where you then plug in measurement and analysis, which mostly is process mining and task mining and these things, with the idea of finding patterns and creating new ideas for the next iteration and so on and so forth. So those are the 3 big concepts in the book.
That's cool. And I have a question on that. Not on these 3, but you started with, in the book, you make a distinction between 4 different types of, I would say, architects, where you say, well, there's a strategic advisor, there's a transformation agent, there's a methodology owner, and then there's a domain expert. And the feeling that I got, or the question may be better than the question that I have, is those 4 roles. You're not talking about one person or a group of persons that have to cycle through those 4 roles, because these are very distinctly different types of people, right? Just talk us through how you see that, because I think that was an interesting part.
It's the archetypes,
Archetypes,
and what I've seen is
when
I talk with clients, and they say, oh, we want to be whatever, have a seat at the table with the big guys or whatever, right? You need to just realize that you might fall in some form or fashion in one or many of those quadrants. And the way what I did is I created a chart, right? Where I said, okay, on the one axis you have the specificity, right? So the degree of contribution, high to low, low to high. And the other one is the value that you add, the strategic stuff, if you will, also from low to high. So that gives you a super sweet 2x2 matrix.
There you go.
And what I've seen is low degree of contribution, low impact. Those were the places where you typically saw architects, the methodology guys. Oh, we built the ivory tower. And I've literally seen organizations firing them because they couldn't communicate. And they actually did good work when we took their content and imported it then in our tool, right? But they were not able to do that. So that's a low corner, right? And then on the low high, so the southeastern quadrant, you will see those. You will see those domain experts, right? This is, no offense to anyone, if somebody says I'm a Salesforce architect or I'm a SAP architect or I'm a so-and-so architect, my first thought is, oh, you're a developer who wants to have a nicer title, right? So those are the experts in their thing, right? And I don't want to belittle that. They might be good, right? That they might be. You might find, for example, process architects there, or IT architects, or data architects, right? But they have their blinders on. They do their thing. Oh, Casper, you're modeling processes. That's your gig. You don't care what the IT guy does.
Yeah, no,
Why should I?
for
Right.
sure.
So I propose a couple of other roles, like a solution architect who brings that all together, right?
Yeah.
When you go to the value contribution, so the upper two quadrants, right?
Yeah.
And you see the low high, those are the strategic advisors. That is what a lot of people strive for. The what, I want to have a seat at the table. Look what I bring to it. I know what's going on, how things are wired up in our organization, and I know where the skeletons are buried. Bring me to the table and pay me. So people, in all seriousness, helping defining the what, right? So you see things like capabilities and maps and all that type of stuff there. And then the high is the transformation agents, because those are the guys who may or may not contribute to the what, but those are the guys who are tasked with making it real, right? And define the how. Well, how do we do this now, right? And what I've seen is in clients, it's very interesting. And I have another graphic where we had an example client and we mapped out what their activities are on that 2x2. And it was like in the left-hand side of it, right?
Okay.
I was at another client who just had the lower two, right? And said, no, but I want to be in the upper left. So it's a very helpful tool if you do that and say, okay, how much time do you spend with what? Right.
All right, cool.
It's not meant as a role as you might have it defined in your framework, like, oh, you have a modeler and a solution architect and one. I talk about that as well, but I use that 2x2 to set the stage, to say, okay, in the past, it was the ivory tower, methodology gurus, the committee of no, whatever, right? And we need to change, because otherwise the never will be taken serious. It always will be this, buy some 2x4s and start hammering. What's wrong with that?
I like that.
Right?
I think that's really good. Because I think ultimately you have like this transformation of the maturity of the whole organization in the context of your architecture or process management. And then you look at the single individuals and you're always like drafting out roles that are like the ideal state. And they say, so, and then you go, well, who are we going to nominate? Let's say, who are we going to nominate as a process owner? And they said, so what does he have to do? And you come up with a finite, final like role, like, like wishful thinking. Yeah. And then they said, well, we can't nominate anybody. Nobody fits that role, that profile. So, but really locking in the people and already doing like an analysis or stakeholder analysis on what their capabilities are, and also talk with them about why and how they can develop. I think that's really, for the kind of like the case of motivation and adoption, that is really good, because you're also going on to the individual level of talking about what trainings do you need, what support or coaching do you need. And I think it's also a good means to also sell from a consulting perspective, actually, that this adoption takes time, and you need certain different tools to make it happen. Yeah, so it's not just a one-off here. Here's a training on the role. I've been to a customer that says, we want to have a training on BPM. I said, okay, and want to learn the tool as well. They said, okay, so I can do this in 3 days. And I said, yes, but and then we can model. I said, well, you can model, but your task is to create a whole BPM organization and roll it out into the organization. And you think that with 4 hours, let's say, what is BPM about? And then 1.5 days, how do I use the tool? And then you will never need any other support from anybody. You will just kind of like make it all happen. And I said, that's maybe a bit naive, but then I was being patronizing and you just okay, just keep on going. No, but seriously, that say kind of like very simplified to certain people, putting people in the cast, but then also talking about what your target state is and looking who can develop, who has actually the potential to develop in certain areas. And then be talking to HR management about what the current state of the staff is concerning the organization and how you want to develop them, what has to change. I think it's great if you get, and with all the topics you're talking about, I'm always thinking, that's why I'm kind of like still going, if you're allowed to select the tool. Oh yeah, yeah. If you have the mandate to do one architecture, define it for the one company. Wow. So, but ultimately, as said, not just from a book perspective, you have to go in with your like ideal world model, and then along the way, just see, do I get somebody to listen to me on this topic, and work your way through. And I mean, you're saying architecture, and when I hear architecture, I always think more about enterprise architecture. And then you said yes, but then there's also people talking about process architecture.
Oh,
Any
yeah, don't
company I
trigger
go
me.
into, there's
Don't.
at least six different people that have in their head defined the architecture already somehow,
Yeah,
not necessarily documented it, and definitely not, let's say, have the mandate or the capability to communicate a unified architecture that more or less serves all, yeah, in a way. And that's where you do have to find compromises. We had this a discussion not too long ago, Caspar, talking about this, the dilemma of people wanting very fine modeled like artifacts. Some people needing more the end-to-end view, others the functional view, and then big discussions on LinkedIn about how many levels and how do we do it. And I was going, you know, that's really something that I see as the big challenge. You talk architecture, and then a lot of people, practically, they're put into, say, one little spot of the architecture. Yeah, so they have one
yeah.
use case. They have to expand from there. So I think it's a good, let's say, have to have this like the big picture and the ideal state. But especially around the architecture topic itself, I think it's just it's in itself like a journey of bit by bit creating an aligned view on the process, the enterprise architecture,
Yeah.
including all levels of end-to-end functional processes, applications, capabilities, bringing this all into one. Beyond the fact that they have different organizations, roles already established, and tools in place that you have to slowly but surely adopt. But that's
So
like the
too
tough
many,
stage we have.
too many topics to talk about right now. But the big thing that is one of my big pet peeves is what you and Caspar just said. If people hear architecture, they think IT. So this is, to me, when they hear process management, it's a complete different discipline, or process mining, complete different discipline, or
Oh yeah.
enterprise architecture, complete different nonsense. It's the same thing. God damn it. An organization has an architecture,
There you
either
go.
planned or organically grown. I'm doing high
Yeah,
commas here,
quote
right?
unquote. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So they have this. So now your choice is, will you go manage it going forward, or will you muddle through? Right. And to me, those distinctions that I just made, business architecture, process mining, process management, IT architecture management, data management, it's the same thing. It's the same coin. You just look at it from different angles.
Oh yeah.
And that's why the book is called Successful Architecture Implementations. What I do in the book is I take that approach that I mentioned before, strategy, governance, technology, import, or content, and I lay that out. So that's the structure of the book. But at the end of it, I also say, okay, can we have a real life application of these concepts? And I chose business process management.
I saw that. Well done.
Because it's the better. It's superior.
Clickbait to go home. I chose that to put that contrapoint to the word architecture. But in that chapter, I'm babbling about, Russell, exactly what you said, functional decomposition versus end-to-ends, and how do I actually do the import in a tool, yada, yada, yada. Right? How do I analyze processes? And I have the concept of the base analysis, in lack of a better word. What does the tool that you're using have as scripts, and what should you look at? And I'm babbling a little bit about the different types of waste, because I love how the lean folks look at this. If you have no clue what to do, right, look at those 7 or 8 types of waste, try to figure out the value, and run the damn reports that your tool has. And you're the smartest person in the room. Right.
Oh yeah.
Then I say, okay, you can do a little bit better. One advanced technique is simulation. right? So
Mm-hmm.
I write about simulation and the benefits that it gets your business case and yada, yada, yada. And I said, oh, wait, there's more. There's something called process intelligence, right? And full disclosure, that's the hook for my second book that I'm currently writing. But the idea is to say, oh, there's more to this. And I have a Venn diagram. If you think about human-centric versus data-oriented analysis, so the main promise is you need to get three things right. You need to create visibility, because what you don't see, you can't improve, right? Then you need to analyze it, and then you need to put it into execution. Because if you don't do anything with it, everything else is moot. So in that analysis thing, the middle step, you have those guardrails, data-oriented versus human-oriented, if you will. And you have on this certain technologies, right? So on the data side, you have things like BI, where you look at past data. Oh, you have process mining, where you have a specific flavor on it. Or on the human side, well, the SMEs tell you whatever they want. You have the butcher block stuff and you model, right? Or you have the lean and Six Sigma people who end up in statistic world, So there's different thing on that continuum. And I didn't want to go overboard with it because the second book I'm writing is about successful process mining projects, but it gives you the hook to it. And the idea of that chapter, which is double the size of any of the other chapters, is to make it quote unquote real as you can have it in a book, right? To say, why do I have to think about it? And why do I do this? For example, Kaspar, when you think about, you do the functional decomposition versus end-to-end. Well, what do you do with risks? Right? How do you handle that? Right? Hint, hint.
For sure.
It's an architecture viewpoint, make it a reporting exercise. But you need to cover those things because those are questions that I see in real life coming up.
It's an interesting point. Because in the end, and that's always, I always say that enterprise architecture and BPM I call them complementary. They are very close to each other. They just look at the same thing differently and they call it slightly different. And that makes them think that they are completely, entirely independent from each other. If you ever want to have fun, just type in EA versus BPM in LinkedIn and you're going to have a proper troll war on your hands. But it's fine. It was absolutely fine. But I think it's complementary. The thing is that with architectures, to me, it's always a bit more, let's say, theoretical. And when you go to the BPM level, it tends to get less theoretical, but it's still an exercise on paper, whether that's digital or not. The real execution, obviously, happens on the shop floor and is measured either via task mining or process mining or whatever it is that you do nowadays.
Or how many widgets you get from the conveyor belt and you just count.
Exactly. It's exactly. And I had a very interesting conversation with a company from Sweden that develops eye tracking devices. So it's a pair of glasses which has cameras built into the lens that look at exactly where your eye is looking at, and it can transform that in a picture. So if you work in a conveyor belt on a manufacturing line and you do the quality check on a car, it can exactly see if you touched all the points on the car that you need to touch as a quality inspection, which goes one step further than what task mining and process mining can do. That's really funky stuff.
But don't seem to have works councils in Sweden.
No, just Russell, do it differently. Just buy a damn Apple Vision Pro for $3,500. You can do the same. They do eye tracking as well, and you can watch Netflix on it. That's a double win for me.
True. The Netflix part. Yeah, I don't think that other thing can do that. But I saw some stuff, and they work with some interesting car companies to get that to use that. But the point I'm trying to get to is I really like that BPM chapter. Just to come back to your book, and because you do put it in perspective, and the functional so here's the thing that I would like to bounce off you, Roland, because and Russ and I did a complete podcast between the two of us. We just recently released it on process hierarchies. When I talk to customers that are going through an S4 transformation, they tend to go after the S4 best practice framework that they have. And then they have this functional decomposition in there at level 1, 2, 3, and then it goes all the way down to transaction, yada, yada, yada. And then I see level one, manage finance, manage HR, manage this, manage that, and then source to pay as a level one functional domain. And that just makes me cringe.
You see how I shrink a little bit in my seat.
Thank you.
Yes.
That was the reaction I needed. How do you look at that? Because in your book you go into functional versus end to end, and I think that you explain it in a very clear way. Just for our listeners, how do you approach that topic?
So it's three questions that you have. One is
cool.
How do you do responsibilities? Right, because you need the one throat to choke, right? So that is if Caspar, not the process modeler, but Caspar, the CFO, joins, right? You want to make sure that all your finance processes are done the same way, the same accounting principles and whatever. You do it in the same way so that you do the reporting right and make the street happy and what else, right? So you're responsible for one slice. In your example, manage finances, right? Or if Russell is the chief HR person, guess what? You hire, fire, feed, whatever, your people all the same way. That's the functional decomposition. I typically recommend to have a fixed structure in there. So now you could say, do I need 4 levels? Do I need 5 levels? Honestly, I don't care as long as it's not 12 or 35. Right? What you have to do is you have to define the level of abstraction in the information, right? Where do I model apps? Where do I model risks? Where do I put whatever? So that the reader, and now we're getting back to the adoption point, they learn something. It's like a website. You learn that the menu is on top. You have learned that the company logo in the upper left-hand corner always brings you back to the homepage. So you have certain conventions that you just as a reader learn, and you don't want to disrupt that, right? So have a structure. The second thing is now comes reality. Because what do you have? You want to improve something. And you better do not improve in silos.
Yeah,
right, which are also seen, right? So this is where the end-to-end view comes into place, right? Where you have those things like procure to pay, hire to fire, record to report, all those usual suspects, right? Because the benefit of those is you can measure output, right? And you can say, oh, are we faster, whatever, more capacity? In the other book, I will talk about the levers of a process, and I try to be cute. Let's start all with C. So you have capacity. How many widgets do I get from that process, or how many underwritten contracts and whatnot? I have course of time, right? How long does it take? Do I get better? Whatever, right? Do I have empty time in there that I can optimize? I have cost. I have
course.
Compliance, right? So am I with one leg in jail or not? I do have customer experience, right? Because that's what sells in our society today, right? So is it pleasant? Is it clear what you do and what your processes, which impact they have, yada, yada, yada. And I have caliber for quality, right? To measure the quality. So these are 6 levers of a process. I'm pretty sure if we think hard enough, you find a couple of more.
Of course.
Keep it manageable, 5 to 10 is all good. The interesting question is, Caspar, when you think about the process, how does a good process look like?
That's a
Are
good
you
question.
the cheap guy? Are you the cheap guy? Is cost for you the big thing? So you don't care how long it takes. You don't care if you create the most optimal amount of widgets in there, as long as the cost is cheap. Or then you have Russell, who is the slave driver, fast, and he has his
it looks
whip,
like that, doesn't he?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I leave that up to you,
But we look the same, so it's fine.
All 3 of us look the same.
You're missing glasses.
I took off my glasses. No, here they are. Here they are.
And that's where I think the end-to-end, putting down, defining these C's and the guardrails or levels of C. That's what I think is where the end-to-end comes in, because you're trying to align the company across the borders of their silos to agree upon one level. So the compliance guys in finance are going, oh, we have to be, super exact. the sales guy says we have to be fast. Yeah. And the quality guy says we have to be super compliant. And we have to level this out because typically the ownerships of certain silos, they have their own like localized silo targets, and they are disjunct or they are not aligned with the others. And looking at the whole operations of a company, except for some certain areas, but typically, if you take, lead to cash, order to cash, you have like a lot of different like silos having to collaborate together. And the misalignment on these 5 or 6 C's is something that just disrupts. You're not walking in one direction, and you're not creating, designing, optimizing, and implementing your processes with the same goal in mind. And that's where I think the end-to-end really plays a heavy role. Yeah.
But it gives you
setting the guardrails, and then once you have your sandpit to play around, and you know how far how big your sandpit is, there you can get and do it as you want to, as long as you don't, you fulfill the requirements or the whatever mommy tells you to do.
It makes it real, right? So now you find that agreement. It's I want to be the fastest, right? To stick with you as Mr. Bigwig. So then you can come up with recommendations and say, oh, if you want to be the fastest, well, hire 20 more people. Right? When you think about simulation, that makes your business case. You run a baseline simulation and say, okay, this is how it runs, right? And then you change your process, how work should be done. Oh, I add 20 more people. Let's see what that bottleneck does. Oh, it goes away. And this is my enhanced capacity and whatnot, So when you do an improvement suggestion, you need to do, in my mind, 2 things. One is you need to show with those levers of a process, what will be the change? Well, if you just throw more bodies on it, yes, you will be faster, you will have more capacity, your cost will go up, right?
Yeah, of course.
Your compliance will go down because us humans, we do mistakes, right? So you have to do more to train them and whatnot. So show the impact on the bigger picture. And then the second thing you need to do is you need to obviously make the case, right? In your case, Russell, if you're faster, you spit out more widgets at the end of the line where they have a value. So if you put in 20 more people, but you produce 50 more widgets and you sell a widget for $100,000, oh, my math is too bad, 50 whatever, right?
Yep.
That's significantly more sales, right? More money in the coffers that make Casper, the numbers guy, happy, right?
Yeah.
So even those 20 guys cost X, you have a positive outcome.
Theoretically, simulation could be something that would help. I mean, then evaluating, say, the costs of compliance or risks, or you always have a lot of hard factors when you say, cost and speed. You can sometimes, how many widgets are falling off the end of the band.
Yeah.
A lot of factors are some things that, there is like this company, how sustainable do you want to be? Or how compliant do you want to be? Do you want to just go for the risky situations, see how you manage the incidents, or do you want to be clean? Yeah. And then maybe filling this into a simulation. Yeah. Okay. Maybe it's, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of processes on a global scale that have really worked with simulation on a mathematical model. But ultimately, I think in your head, you go through the scenarios. Yeah. So you're simulating, not mathematically with a process model that has all the data, how to, evaluate each risk and each incident and put that into euros. But it's more you're simulating in the sense of walking through the scenarios of what if, if I do go up, I mean, beyond the cost factors, there are certain factors where you say, is this something that we can accept? Can we accept the higher risk there? And then you have like a consensus of how far you want to go in being in compliant, taking certain risks. In the context of clients' satisfaction, customer satisfaction says, yeah, we can try and do it even cheaper, but the disruption of the process, it's going to happen. We're going to have 10% more customers with returns because, How much is it going to cost us? We don't know. Do we want to do it? And that's when decision taking comes place. So what I think is good about the architecture idea is that these thoughts of different C's coming together and having to align on how far we're going to go with this across the silos and functional areas and departments, that they have to understand what the implications are of their process design and how they implement it. And they, best case, they get a proper mandate, a proper guideline from the CFO who says, I want it cheap and fast.
I agree. I agree.
If you say so, let's blow up the oil well, but then they will never be. They said, I didn't say that. Did I say that? Really? Seriously? Do you have anything written? No. But no, seriously.
That is why I'm saying. That's why I'm saying it's. Yeah, that's why I'm saying it's the same thing, because on a 100,000-foot level, what do architects do? They define their thing, right? Their application catalog, their process catalog, their whatever, right? Then they do some analysis on this thing, come up with hopefully some smart ideas, and then they plan the implementation, and then they measure it, right? So it's pretty straightforward. And that is why I'm saying it's not different disciplines, because to come up with a proposal or an analysis outcome, you need to take into consideration all those aspects. We spoke about simulation, process simulation. What would be the thing behind it? Well, guess what? If your recommendation is we're going to replace that SAP system that everybody hates with Excel, and look how many license costs we save in there, right? Well, you need to do some analysis, right?
Yep.
Where else do we need that SAP system? Oh, by the way, what would it cost to migrate the data? Oh, how many of that new shiny Excel do we need? So now we're talking with the IT folks, the enterprise architects, cringe, that do that stuff. But they both need to come together. But the data guys need to come in. The risk guys need to come in. You need to define a solution and make a proposal and say, we think you should go this way, and this is what it costs, and this is what the outcome will be. And once you have that, you get the green light, you implement it, you need to measure it. And what I see is, and that might be a nice final point, is I see a lot of projects who just measure busyness. Oh, how many trainings did we do? Oh, we got 50 people passed through the training. Good job, and then the project is over and everybody goes elsewhere. What they haven't measured is if Casper, the new accountant that we just hired, if he does his job 6 months down the road, better, faster, cheaper than he did before in the old situation. And I have not seen a lot of organizations who do this benefits measurement over time, because that's what actually counts.
Or the real process adoption. How far is the design process in place? I mean, that's a big idea about a lot of process mining. I think a big benefit could be that people really say, this is the process we're designing. We need to track after go live how well the adoption of this new process is, and that it takes time, retraining, and people getting used to the process, and that then you go out and do some additional optimization and harvesting of the potential that you planned in your business case. But I think to summarize and that's why maybe, at first thinking about the way you didn't take a stance on saying enterprise architecture and BPM too much on the title, so it's architecture in general. I think what is really good about that, and especially the thing you explained at the end, is no matter where your starting point is, ultimately you want to have more or less a unified architectural model that you work on to get these people together, to get the IT architects, process architects, that the compliance, let's say call them architects, or the compliance, accountables on board, to really understand where you are and to agree upon where you want to go. And I think it's fundamental, because it's so complex, the organization in itself, but all the interdependencies of all these different aspects we've talked about, that you also said guardrails with maybe 5 to 6 C's. This has to be, if you don't have alignment there, if you don't get a common, let's say, knowledge and a common understanding, a common terminology, a common taxonomy to discuss these matters, it's going to be, it's like 10 people from 10 different countries talking different languages, not really understanding each other and not being able to work together as a team. And that's ultimately what I think a big part about this architecture is. And that's why I do like a especially this stance on actually not taking too much ground between, what is the best architecture. There are certain basic principles about architectural work. Even if you're starting with a small initiative or you have the big mandate for be the global architect for our transformation, that I think are fundamentally valid for small and big initiatives. And with small initiatives, you can grow. With big initiatives, you can keep your eyes also for the details of the small initiatives you wanna incorporate in your thinking. So I think that's maybe that's something that I think it really is worth digging into.
And
that's why that's why I took out, Russell, to your point, that's why I took out the actual content part, if you will. I do not say you must have a service-oriented architecture, which I think is outdated anyways, or a zero trust architecture, or whatever the buzzword of the day is, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, that's content. One of the three things: content, adoption, and governance, right?
Yeah.
The objective of the book is to show that bigger picture, because what you see is in implementations, it very quickly narrows down, especially when we talk about IT architecture implementations, tool like LeanIX or Alphabet or whatever, that type of more IT focused stuff. You end up in the weeds, right? How do you calculate the IT cost? Following the APTIO ITBM model.
Yeah.
It's like you forget, you don't see the forest for the trees. And the idea behind is, with that approach that I have in there: strategy, governance, technology, content, those four areas, that helps you to see the forest, right? To say, it's great, we can fight over how we calculate our cost. That's great. You still miss the boat if you don't have the adoption or the rules of engagement of all the players being defined, or if you don't know where you want to go with that whole thing, right? So I hope that those 380 pages that I wrote are a little contribution to the maturity of our discipline, to say, okay, yes, it's important, it might be urgent, but hey, there's a bigger picture behind it. And this is how you will be guided through that bigger picture.
So last words, Roland. When and where can we get the book? So for the audience.
That's a good question.
So the good question is, it's in the camera. No, just kidding. We will see when this is. Yeah. Oh, we will see.
Well, we see it on the YouTube version.
We'll put it on. And we will put the show notes as well with the ISBN number. But
it's easier. It's easier. It's super easier. So first of all, depends on when this episode will be published. It might be on the market as well. So publishing day is March 24th. As of today, when we record it, when you go to Amazon, you Google the title or search my name, you will find the book. It's on pre-order on Kindle. So I have an offer for you. I have actually offers for your listeners. The first one is, if we're still in the pre-order phase, then if you pre-order the book, I will send you, and you send me the receipt, I will immediately send you a PDF of the book so that you don't have to wait until the 24th.
Okay.
The book comes with a couple of extras, freebies that will be downloadable from the website, which is whatsyourbaseline.com/successful architecture implementation. I was very creative.
Yeah, makes sense.
Which is all the graphics of the book, because the paperback is printed in black and white, and I created that stuff in nice colors, like the ebook that has the nice colors. So you get all the slides in a Creative Commons license, so you can reuse it, right? As long as you say, oh, Roland did it. It also has two little tools. One is a worksheet, how to select your architecture tool, a Google Sheet, and the other one is a tracker in Notion for content import. So those are the three freebies that come with the book. There's a QR code in the back where you get to that page, and a code where you then can download it. And the second offer that I have is, and I know, Caspar, you will like it, and Russell, I will give you 3 copies of the book that you can give away or keep for yourself. I heard you have little children that need to learn that stuff too. So I put the pressure on you, whatever you will do with that. And if you give it away, I would be very happy if the people who get it and read it leave a little review on
Yeah,
Amazon,
I'm
because that
sure we
seems
can
to be
make that happen.
the
Totally.
currency.
And please sign them. Please sign them in love.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Do sign them so they become more valuable. It's been an absolute pleasure, Roland. I really need to wrap this up now. I'm sort of the timekeeper usually. It's the whole thing I took from this is that your book describes a great number of ideas and methodologies how to fight artificial accuracy, which is what enterprise architects and architectures typically tend to lead with, because they make you believe that they can be very accurate about something, which in reality, to the point that you mentioned pretty much to the end, you don't see the forest for the trees anymore. So I think it's a great medicine for that. We love to have you on the show today. We're very happy that we could catch you. We might honor your publication of the book with the publication of this episode on the same day.
Hey.
So I think that might be in it. We don't want to steal your thunder, but we just want to elevate your thunder. We
already did a podcast episode on what's your baseline.
I know.
Where JM asked the hard investigative
questions. I know. We just trying to go light on you today.
Oh, well, it's a complete different conversation, because we spoke about the content.
Yeah.
JM and I spoke more about, how did the book come by? Why you? Why now?
The story behind the book
and all that stuff, which is also interesting. But obviously,
of course,
you see the point.
I see the point.
Yeah. I thank you for having me. I hope it's a value add for your readers. Again, you can download a sample of the book if you're on the fence. You can download a sample also on that same page, whatsyourbaseline.com/successful architecture implementation, singular, not plural, because you do it once. And if you like it, hop over to Amazon, get your copy, and let me know, or win it from Caspar and Russell, and let me know what you think.
Yeah. So our main message to our listeners is buy the damn book. It will make you better. Roland, thank you very much for being here. Russell, thanks to you as well. And see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.